What's up, everybody? Happy off season. Welcome to the first Lightning Round podcast off season show. Starting it off in style, as we always do, with our salary cap and internal free agent show. You're here with me, Jamie, and of course, Craig. Craig, how's it going? How you doing?
Good, man. I'm ready to get back rock and rolling. We had a little bit of a break there. I think we all needed to kind of decompress, take a deep breath from the way the season ended, but now off season is in full swing, so let's get it done.
Amen to that. So you guys will notice Garrett is not with us tonight. Just wanted to give him a quick shout out, let him know that Craig and I are thinking about him. He's got some stuff going on. Don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but just want him to know that his TLR family is thinking about him. We love him, and we hope everything works out here soon for him and the family.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We will see you soon.
So let's go ahead and get started. We're here to talk Chargers offseason, specifically the salary cap and internal free agents. And unless you live under a rock, you're aware that the Chargers have a lot of money to spend this offseason. It's been all over Twitter and social media in general, people talking about all the money the Chargers have. So they are going into the offseason before making any cuts or restructures or anything like that with a ton of cap space to work with. And that cap space looks like this. So right now, the NFL salary cap is projected to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $272,500,000. The Chargers right now have $214,343,180 in existing salary cap liabilities. They also have roughly $4.9 or $5 million in cap left over from last year, which they're going to roll over towards the cap. So adding that $4.9 million, the salary cap for them is $277,400,000, give or take. They've got $214 million and change in cap space right now, which means their existing cap space, before talking about draft spend, before talking about in-season spending, their existing cap space is $63,056,820. So before they make a single cut, before they think about extending anyone, before they think about restructuring anyone, they've got $63 million and change to spend. And there are a couple categories that I mentioned there that we have to take away from that. One is draft liabilities. The Chargers are going to be drafting 22nd this year, and that means that their total spend for their draft class is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of an estimated $2.5 million. And typically, teams will save somewhere around $8 million for in-season spending. Whether or not they spend all of that remains to be seen, but they'll usually leave themselves that breathing room. And of course, that's something they can dip into for trades after cuts and whatnot. So after you account for those spendings, they have adjusted cap space of $52,556,820. So already going in with quite a bit of money, but there's a lot of room there to clear some space. So first of all, I think we need to talk about cuts. And I think there are 2 or 3 cuts that everybody's kind of got their eyes on. So Craig, why don't you start? Why don't you talk a little bit about cuts that you think the Chargers will make, and what those savings look like and why you think they'll cut those players?
So, as I will say this just to get things started off. After going through this exercise, first and foremost, looking at the entirety of the roster, I mean, they have about 30 guys that were active last year that are literally going to be in free agency this year. So there's a ton of work to do to start replacing this roster and kind of building it up more so in Jim's image. So that, I mean, sounds great in theory, but when we did this, I realized just how much I don't envy having to do this for a living and how this would work. But, is what it is. As far as the cuts go, there are a couple of obvious ones, and I think they're the ones that have been making the rounds for most people. So there's Joey Bosa and Trey Pipkins specifically. When you're talking about Joey Bosa right now, he would be on the hook for over 36 million against the cap next year, and you can't pay that to a guy that's not giving you that type of premier edge rusher production. We see Joey last year basically leave it all out on the field as much as he could. He was dealing with injuries, as he has been here throughout the years, but the on-field performance doesn't match up to what he would be on the books next season. So to me, that seems like an easy one. And you're talking about 25-3 as far as savings on that one is like a little over $11 million dead hit, but that savings is tremendous. We're talking about a little over $25 million that you get if you just let Joey go alone. Trey Pipkins, talking about first and foremost, it's a tackle playing guard, so he's out of position, didn't perform all that well. I mean, we haven't been extremely thrilled with Trey Pipkins throughout the years anyway. Just not someone who's been a consistent performer. Had one pretty decent year, kicked in the guard, which again isn't his natural spot. Doesn't really look at home there. And he ain't all that great at tackle either. So you're not going to pay a guy over $9 million to essentially try to figure it out at another position and not be very good at the one that he's supposed to be playing at. So if you let Trey go, you get a savings of 6.7, a little over 6.7 million. It's a dead hit of about 2.5. So again, no brainer. And then there's the one that I know everybody's going to laugh about because of my Freudian slip, but got to throw the name out there because you got to get him the hell off of the roster. Pretty sure hopefully he's a fantastic guy. Nothing about him personally that I know. So, it is what it is. But Jasir Taylor, easy $1.1 million in cap savings if you get rid of him. Essentially, he's like 33,000 dead hit. So, again, that's a no-brainer. There are a couple of other ones. I'm sure, Jamie, you have some on your mind there, but those are the three. Well, the first two are definitely obvious. Jasir Taylor is another one that I think probably fits the bill. If you want to skim a little bit more off of there to be able to use that money elsewhere, whether we're talking about like extensions or another signing. But there are a couple of others that I'm sure we'll touch on that make a little bit more sense as well and may be able to give you a significant amount more above just like that 1.1 Jasir will save you.
So yeah, talking about the guys that you mentioned first, Bosa's the obvious one. You've got a cap savings of $25,360,000. That's money that you can't walk away from. Joey has been a great Charger at times, but he's, in my opinion, he's nearing the end of his career. I don't think his body can hold up. Seems like his body is betraying him as much as he wants to be out there. It's just not cooperating. You're not getting that elite production. He's not available. And I don't think you can justify bringing him back on the current contract. And I think the flip side of that is if you're looking at availability, if you're looking at production, the only way to really move money around short of adding void years, which the Chargers have not historically done, and I wouldn't expect them to do. The only other thing you can do is potentially extend him to spread some of that money out. But for a guy who's not available, who's getting older and is hurt all the time and isn't producing as much as you'd like, I just don't see how it makes sense to add any more years to that deal. And I don't think you want to get into the void years with him. I just think it's time to kind of reset the edge group, possibly as a whole, but certainly with Joey. So I think this is an easy cut. You walk away from $25.3 million. It's kind of a no-brainer. And then you look at Pipkins, another easy one for me. He turned one kind of mediocre year where nobody was expecting much of him into a 3-year contract extension. And it just hasn't really worked out. He's not good enough to play right tackle, obviously, with Joe Altier. And he clearly showed he's not skilled or aware enough to be an effective NFL guard. So he might be a great guy. He might be a good athlete. He might have traits that they like, but at this point, I don't see how it makes sense to keep him. You need to rebuild the interior of that line completely. You're basically operating with 2/5 of a starting offensive line right now, and you need to start at the guard positions in a big way. So cutting.
But Jamie, he has tackle feet, man. What do you mean?
Yeah, that's true. and a brick for a head, unfortunately. So you cut Trey, and you're saving $6,750,000. So that right there, with just making those two cuts, save you $32,110,000, and it gets the adjusted cap space up to a whopping $84,666,820, roughly. And then, so Craig mentioned Jasir Taylor, and that's somebody who, going into this exercise, I thought maybe you look at cutting him. But at the end of the day, the cornerback room needs depth. He is still a productive special teams player. And I think with how barren the safety room in particular is going to be going into free agency, I think this is a guy you consider keeping for special teams only for now. I don't think he's necessarily an off-season cut. Or I don't think he's a cut like heading into free agency, I should say. But I think you look to bring in guys in the draft and in free agency who could possibly replace him and add to the depth in that cornerback room. So in my opinion, I think Jasir stays. The other guy that I think a lot of people in the Discord in particular have been talking about, who I'm surprised you didn't bring up, is Alohi Gilman.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are talking about cutting him. I want to say if you cut him, you save somewhere in the neighborhood of like $3.5 million. I went into this thinking I was going to cut thinking I was going to cut Alohi. I can't believe I just said that.
Man, you went back. That's crazy.
I did.
I wish.
I don't think they cut him, just because you're going to be losing Tony Jefferson. You could potentially lose Molden. And while you probably don't want Gilman on the field all the time, he's not a bad guy to have around for special teams. He's not a bad guy to have around just to add some depth to the room, maybe as a potential nickel backer or something like that, or a dime linebacker. There's still things that you can do with him where he's not playing as prominent a role. And again, it's a situation where you bring in people to compete with him and hopefully push him out. But I think it's really hard to go into the offseason with just Derwin at safety, not knowing if you can bring back Molden. So that's why I think you kind of go in with Gilman, you try to re-sign Molden, maybe you try to make like a big name free agent signing at safety to who can play some center field to pair with Derwin, and you kind of try to work his way down the depth chart so you're not relying on him quite so much. But so that's one that I think I went in thinking I would cut him, but the more I looked at the roster, anytime you cut somebody, you got to bring in somebody to replace them. They already need to bring in at least two safeties just to compete, probably more. So you cut him, now you're talking about bringing in maybe 4 or 5 safeties to compete. I just think that's a lot to handle in one off season. So I think you just leave the depth and try to, bring in guys who can push him down the depth chart a little bit. At least that's what I would do. Yeah. So for me, I really only have them cutting Bosa and Pipkins. The other name that I would consider, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, is Gus Edwards.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
He's actually, if they cut him, they would save 3.125. So the dead hit on that one is like 1.1 mil, a little over 1.1 mil. So definitely he's on my list. So yeah, I got you there. He has on the books for next year is 3 million. So the savings is definitely there. You're talking about a 30-year-old running back at this point, and we all saw what the performance was last year. But yeah, I'm right there with you.
All right. So that's one that I think they probably do. I just think things didn't go the way they had hoped with him. He just wasn't available enough. They didn't seem to trust him, giving him the ball more than a few times a game when he was available. I think there are probably guys in the draft, and I can think of one off the top of my head who can fill that role really well, who's younger and less expensive, and more fun to watch. That obviously being Cam Scatabo. That's my shameless plug that's going to keep coming over and over and over again throughout the off season. It's going to be a fun off season. Yes. It's not going away. So just get used to that. So yeah, so you save $3 million with Gus. I think that's a pretty easy cut. Now you're looking at 35,110,000 that you're saving from cuts. And that pushes you to just under 88 million in cap space before any extensions or restructures. So I think that puts the Chargers in a really, really good spot. So I'm going to go ahead. I did not have Gus in here, but I'm going to go ahead and add him because I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to say Gus, 3 million. And so that puts us at $87,666,820, give or take $1, which is a pretty nice spot to be in. And now, kind of heading into, looking at the roster, guys who are due extensions. And there's one big one on that list that I think is right at the tip of everybody's tongue, and that is obviously left tackle Rashawn Slater. Slater is due an extension. You would think the Chargers would be very interested in extending a top 5 or 6 left tackle in the NFL and making sure he's here long term. I know I would be. So for the sake of this exercise, I went ahead and worked up an extension for Rashawn Slater. Craig, did you come up with an extension for Slater?
No, that wasn't my pick, even though he was one that I do believe they're going to do this offseason. I had a feeling you might go in that direction, so I was looking at someone else.
So what was your extension?
So I was actually looking at good old Derwin James, mainly because we do know that he's going to be someone that's going to be on the team long term. I believe that the Chargers look at him naturally as one of the team leaders, and they'll probably want to keep him around as long as humanly possible. So, I mean, as of right now, we're talking about going into next season with a cap hit of, well, his base salary next year is over 13 million, so 13.7. So I'm thinking there's an opportunity there to possibly extend him out at least another 2 years and have him go into, 31. Well, he'll be 31, 32 years old at that point. And you want to try to maybe cut that cap down a bit to maybe get him around an annual of around, if possible, 7.5 to 8 million, and knock that number down a bit over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. So for me, that's the number that I'm looking at for that particular player. It feels like someone they're looking to keep around anyway. And I'm honestly not surprised if he'd be looking to accept that as well. I don't think Derwin's in a rush to go anywhere. I feel like this is home for him and he'd welcome a fair extension. So
you cut out there for a second.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you said, I don't think he's looking to go anywhere, and then you cut out.
Okay, so I don't think he's looking to go anywhere. LA's home for him, and I feel pretty confident in the fact that he'd be more than willing to do an extension. So something that kind of averages him out, to about 7.5 or so a year annual.
Okay, so we both targeted Derwin for something this offseason, and we went in very different ways. So you targeted him for an extension, and I looked at him for a restructure.
Okay.
And I looked at him for a restructure for a couple of reasons. One is because for the last couple of years, he's been earning a lot of money and not playing very well, with the exception of 2024. He had a really bad downturn due to some injuries, some system issues, some coaching issues, did not play well for a couple of years, was really getting hit hard with penalties, was in a lot of ways hurting the team more than he was helping it on the field. And the other thing is, as well as he played last year, and I do think he played well, I just think he fit in the system and blended in better this year than he has in recent years. And he started to come forward as a playmaker towards the end of the season. I think this is an opportunity to go to him and say, you need help and we need help. We need to clear some cap space. So let's talk about restructuring your deal. And remember, in the NFL, if you restructure, which is basically just moving money around. It's not changing how much money a player is earning. It's taking money from one bucket and putting it in another bucket for effective cap savings, right? So they're not cutting his pay. They're just moving money from one place to another. So for me, I think this is an opportunity to go to him and say, and they don't need his permission to do this, by the way. They don't need him to sign off on it. They can just move the money around because a lot of it's already been paid. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up his contract here so we can see it. Let me see here. All right, let's see if I can share that. Yeah, it's not going to work. Okay. I don't know why.
Technology is the greatest.
So Craig mentioned Derwin has a $13.75 million base salary this year. He's also earning a $4.1 million prorated portion of his signing bonus. He has a $3 million signing bonus and a $3 million roster bonus due this year. So he has a cap hit of almost $24 million, $23.85 million and change. This year, for a player with 7 years of service time, the minimum NFL salary is $1.225 million, which means they can restructure Derwin all the way down to $1.225 million and save a ton of cash by turning that money into signing bonus spreading it out over the last 2 years of the deal.
Yeah.
So my thought was you take the maximum restructure, which in this case is you take $12,495,000 and you convert it into signing bonus, which then prorates it over the next 2 years. So you wind up taking, let me see here. So you wind up adding $6,475,000 in signing bonus over 2025 and again in 2026. Then you take his roster bonus, which is probably due on the third league year of this year. You take that bonus and you roll it up into the base salary that you converted into signing bonus, and you convert that into signing bonus too. So now you've got $15,495,000 that you've spread out over the next 2 years in the form of signing bonus. And you are then saving $7,747,500 against the cap by just moving some money from one bucket to the other. And again, you don't need Derwin's permission to do this. So you save almost $7.5 million against the cap. That takes you to 90, let's see, basically 95, almost $96 million in free cap. And that's what you do in terms of a restructure. So you're at $95,681,000 and change in cap space by doing that. So that's how I would approach Derwin. I don't know that I would necessarily extend him. I wouldn't object to it, depending on what the numbers look like. But I think a restructure might make a little bit more sense, in my opinion. So that's what I did there. And then my extension was Rashawn Slater, because I think that's got to get done. In fact, I'm kind of blown away that it hasn't gotten done yet. So if you look at Slater's contract, he's entering his 5th year contract extension, or his 5th year option, from his rookie deal. and he's got $19,040,000 in guaranteed salary coming his way this year. The two most recent contract extensions for younger left tackles were Christian Darrisaw and I'm blanking on the other one. Shoot, I'm forgetting what his name was. But anyway, so we had there was one extension that was for $115 million over 5 years, and there was one extension that was for about $80 million over 5 years. The $115 million one was the most recent one. So I kind of looked at that and I said, okay, I feel like if we go for a 5-year extension somewhere in the neighborhood of $120 million, that's a pretty good spot for Slater to be. So what I did was I did a 5-year, $120 million extension with $85 million in guarantees, $70 million of which are fully guaranteed in the form of signing bonuses and guaranteed salaries, and another $15 million in roster bonuses. And in the process of doing that, I took $5 million that he was due this year in his guaranteed salary, which you're able to do when you extend a player who's entering the 5th year of his rookie contract, and I turned it into signing bonus as a part of that $20 million signing bonus that he got. So he's getting $15 million in new signing bonus money, another $5 million converted from base salary this year into signing bonus. And I effectively lowered his cap hit from $19,040,000 to $15,040,000 and saved $4 million against the cap this year. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on the numbers here because there's a lot of numbers and it's going to get confusing really fast. But basically what you see is his cap hit going from 15 million to 17 million and change next year to 21 million and change the year after that. In 2028, it'll be 24 million and change, then 27 and change, and 30 and change. And basically we structure this deal in such a way that you give yourself an out after the 3rd year of the extension, which is when the roster bonuses start getting more expensive. So you save $4 million. You save $4 million against the cap this year, and you wind up with another. You're basically at $99 million. Just under $100 million in cap space between your cuts, extending Slater, and restructuring Derwin.
Just in case Ed McGuire needed any help, I think he should definitely check this pod out.
I think Ed's probably got it under control.
Yeah.
But I'm
sorry, man. I don't envy that man's job, man. This is, as far as capping, I'm like, Jamie's more the capologist than I am, but just going through again this exercise, it's like doing this for a living and enjoying it. Got to be a different type of guy.
Yeah, it's not something that I ever thought I would get into, but the more time I spent digging into the numbers, I kind of enjoy predicting the numbers because I feel like I hit them more often than not. It's kind of fun to dig into that and figure out how to put those numbers together.
Yeah.
So before we've re-signed any free agents, whether they're exclusive rights, restricted or UDFA, we have roughly $100 million in cap space. So now we get to talk about which guys that are free agents do the Chargers keep. And remember, there are 3 classes of free agents. You have your exclusive rights free agents who almost always get re-signed because it's a procedural thing that nobody else can negotiate with them, and teams usually lock them up just to keep those young guys in the system. Then you have your restricted free agents, and there are different tiers of contracts you can offer your restricted free agents. And I'm going to go ahead and pull those up now. Let me see here. me see if I have it. All right. So we have 3 different classes of restricted free agents. Those are first round tender, which means you protect them with a first round pick. So if somebody signs them to a contract, you get a first round pick in return, or you have the opportunity to negotiate a lower pick. The next tier is a second round pick. Again, you protect them by slapping second round pick compensation to them should somebody sign them. And the other one is a right of first refusal, which you don't get a draft pick in return, but basically you retain your negotiating rights if somebody offers them a deal. So let's start with talking about the exclusive rights free agents. And there's only one, and that is fullback / tight end Tucker Fisk. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the exclusive rights free agents, like I said, it's a procedural thing. Nobody else can negotiate with them unless the Chargers choose not to make them an offer and they release them. In this case, I would expect that the Chargers probably offer them. These guys get paid league minimum. And going into 2025, the league minimum is expected to be $960,000. So just under $1 million. So Craig, what do you think? Does the team keep Tucker Fisk?
Yeah, I think that's an easy one just because of what he adds to the equation as a blocker specifically. It feels like that's someone, I mean, he's still relatively young. I think he'll be 27 going into next season. So I could easily see him being tacked on again as like your tight end 3, also thrown in a fullback role, maybe a little bit of H-back. So someone that they can add to the end of the offensive line as an additional blocker when they want to go heavy for those, big power formations, specifically in the around the goal line. So I think it's kind of a no-brainer. It feels like they like him, so I wouldn't be shocked if they did retain him.
Yeah, he was a pretty big part of the running game the second half of the season. So at $960,000, it's one of those kind of easy slam dunk decisions that you make where it's like, all right, well, it's not costing us anything, and we know what we're going to get out of him, and it's one less roster spot you have to fill. So I agree. I think they keep him. You're talking about $960,000. So, we said we're just under $100 million in cap space. You re-sign Tucker Fisk. Now you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of 98.6 million dollars in cap space, which brings us to the restricted free agents. So I mentioned you have the 3 tiers: first round, second round, and right of first refusal. The Chargers have 2 restricted free agents this year. They are Stone Smart and Foster Sarell. So, Craig, what do you have the team doing with Smart and Sarell?
So for me, it feels like Stone Smart feels like a keeper. So I mean, I can't imagine anything more than a 3rd round tender on that. It doesn't feel like it's anybody that you're going to have to go out of your way to protect. Stone Smart is an ascending player. He's someone who showed up in flashes here and there just this past season, and you can see the development. I feel like the Chargers have invested in him, so they'll probably want to keep him around. So we're talking about, a team that definitely needs tight end. He can do the job as far as stretching the seams for you. We saw him do a little bit of work on the outside, and they are lacking at, pass catcher at that position and also athleticism. So that feels like an easy one for me. When you're talking about Foster Sarell, strangely enough, they still need a swing offensive tackle. Pipkins kind of sort of manned that, when they moved him out of guard, when there were different injury issues on the outside at tackle, they would put him back at right tackle. He could also play left. We know that's where he started. Foster Sarell probably comes in and plays a little bit more of that swing tackle role for you moving forward. 27 years old, another project player, but, has a really good high athletic pedigree. So if they feel like both, mid-round tenders to me, I don't think there's anything that you have to do to go out of your way, as far as like, slapping a second or first on. Nobody's, doing that. So for me, those seem pretty easy for me. But as far as the numbers go, where you have them?
So I went kind of a different direction with these guys. I don't think you have to protect them. And I don't think you necessarily have to make a restricted free agent tender offer to keep them. So I kind of looked at them the same way the Chargers looked at Parham a couple years ago when he was a restricted free agent, which is, yeah, we want you around, but we're not really interested in paying you $3.1 million, which is the right of first refusal tag. And nobody's going to give us a first or second round pick at $5.27 million or $7.3 million as a first round protected player to sign you. Like, we can decline you as a restricted free agent, and we can still bring both of you back and save some money doing it. So I think both come back. I think Smart comes back. If either one of them gets a longer term deal, it's probably Smart. But I think what you're probably looking at is, especially with Pipkins going and with the uncertainty at both guard spots and Serrell getting some snaps at guard, both in the preseason and in the regular season this year, I think both come back, and both probably come back on very minimal 2-year deals. So I have both coming back on 2-year deals, somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.25 million over the life of the deal. So you're spending $1 million, like 1.1 and change over both of them, or for both of them, excuse me. And it really doesn't cost you anything. It's minimal. There's no risk. You get the opportunity to keep developing both. Maybe they think Serrell can compete at one of the guard positions, or maybe he's just a swing tackle. But with Pipkins gone, with the uncertainty at center, with the uncertainty at left guard as well, I feel like that you bring back somebody who's been around for a few years, and you just see if he can compete and hang on to that spot while drafting somebody in the mid to late rounds to hopefully compete with and replace him, and obviously bringing in some form of competition in the in free agency. I just think it's an easy re-sign, in my opinion. So we were at just under $99 million before re-signing Smart and Serrell, and now we are at I spent $1.25 million on both, so 2.5. So we're talking like $95-ish million, $95 million, somewhere in there. Oh, looks like we lost Craig. So far, we're through all the Chargers low cost free agents, and we're through all their restructures and cuts and extensions. Does anybody have any questions about what we've been talking about so far while Craig comes back in the chat? Any questions about the numbers we're talking about, or anything like that before we move on?
Sorry, audio went out.
That's okay. No worries. All right. So we're somewhere in the neighborhood of about $95 million, bringing back Smart and Serrell. And now we have to talk about their bigger ticket free agents. So the Chargers have something like 30 free agents.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It's crazy. I know we've talked about this list before, but I'm just going to bring it up and we can run through it really quickly. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you.
So when I started going through this, I didn't realize just how many free agents they had.
Yeah. So Chargers free agents, I'm just going to run through them real quick. Mack, Morgan Fox, Christian Fulton, DJ Chark, Easton Stick, Taylor Heineke, Denzel Perriman, J.K. Scott, Asante Samuel Jr., Troy Dye, Poona Ford, J.K. Dobbins, Marcus May, Joshua Palmer, Tony Jefferson, Eli Apple, Elijah Molden, Tyre Tart, Sam Mustipher, Shaquille Quarterman, Jalen Rager, Bradley Bozeman, Hayden Hurst, Chris Rumpf, Simi Fehoko. I don't know why I took the time to repronounce Rumpf's last name. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Jordan McFadden, Foster Serrell, Brendan Hymas, Nick Neiman, Tucker Fisk, and Stone Smart. So, Craig, which free agents, if any, do you have the Chargers keeping?
So let's start at the top. I do believe that because of where they currently stand in the edge room and the fact that I cannot see Joey Bosa coming back for over 30 mil next year, I feel like you have to keep Khalil Mack around. So that's almost a no-brainer. Also, he did, and I thought this was interesting. Initially, when the season ended, he said that he would take some time to try to figure out if he wanted to retire or not. And I think less than a week or so later, he announced that he was. So I can't really see him going anywhere else. I mean, of course, a player of his stature, never having won a playoff game, probably would want an opportunity to latch on to a competitor or contender. But I feel like there's something that he feels is special within the Chargers. So I do believe he'll stay. And I'll just rattle off the name because we're talking about who I think will. So Khalil Mack, I have coming back. I have them re-signing Ford. I think they'll re-sign J.K. Dobbins. I feel like Elijah Molden is someone that you have to bring back, even if you want to get a little weird and cut Alohi Gilman, even though I do think Alohi will be back. The safety room is super important, and I truly believe they like what they've built there and the ability to keep Derwin playing in the box and these guys on the back end. Tyre Tart, I feel like, is a definite must re-sign. Oddly enough, I do feel like they may bring Bradley Bozeman back in a backup role. And they also like him as a locker room guy. I think they re-signed J.K. Scott. Troy Dye can be a key special teams contributor, but he also played pretty decently in his snaps as a linebacker, coming in when Denzel Perryman went down. So he was a part of that rotation. Taylor Heineke. I do know that, well, first and foremost, you're bringing Taylor Heineke back because Easton Stick. You just got to stop that. And I feel much more comfortable with Taylor Heineke if he has to see the field for any reason. Nick Neiman, core special teams guy, someone who doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for being someone who steps on the field every week and just gets the job done. There were a lot of big plays on returns that could have broke bigger if it not for Nick Neiman and some key special teams tackles. Believe it or not, I think there's an opportunity also for Tony Jefferson to come back as well. It'll be for next to nothing, not a whole lot, but Jefferson actually showed that he can still contribute. I mean, the dude's going to be 33 next year. He didn't have an entire offseason to prepare, and he grew throughout the season. You can see him really start getting his legs under him, and I think, again, they want to keep that safety room intact, but also you have someone that is a leader, and I could easily see him coming back on an additional one-year deal, something short-term like that. So for me, those are the guys that I have. So altogether, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, just 11 guys off of that list of, 28, 29 players?
I think it's 30, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
So since we're talking salary cap, did you come up with contract suggestions for all of those guys?
Yep, absolutely. So Khalil Mack, I'm thinking you bring back on a 2-year, and I get it. He's going to be 34 years old, but the truth of the matter is he was still performing at a very high level. Edge rushers get paid at a premium cost. I still think you're probably going to have to pay him somewhere between 38 to 40 mil with like 33 to 35 guaranteed, but that's on a 2-year deal. And again, this also might be one of those quote unquote legacy signings as well. So they're not going to disrespect the guy. I feel like they're going to pay him maybe even a little bit more than what he technically should be getting at 34, but it's not like his play fell off of a cliff. He's still a very, very solid edge setter, even if he's not getting after the quarterback and sacking them to the degree that he was when he was younger. Poona Ford, I've got Poona on, and something else that I noticed in this exercise, no one got above a 3-year contract for me because a lot of these players still feel like bridge guys. So I absolutely see them sticking around for the next few years, but while the rest of the roster is being built through the draft and just being leaders, people who can contribute, still perform at a higher level for the next couple seasons. So Poona Ford, got Poona on a 3-year deal, but that 3rd year with the ripcord potentially, so probably ends up coming out to like 2. But right now, for the sake of this, I got him at 3 years with 9 mil, but about 5.5 of that being guaranteed. J.K. Dobbins, 2 years, 8 mil, a little more than half of that guaranteed. So I got him at about 4.5. Elijah Molden, another 3-year guy. This is one of the players that I think could actually stick around a little bit longer, but for the purposes of this, 3 years, 12 mil. And I've got him at about like 8.5 guaranteed. Tyre Tart, 2-year guy, 6 mil, 3.5 of that guaranteed. Bradley Bozeman as a backup. I have him as a 1-year guy, $1.5 million. I'm not spending a ton on Bradley Bozeman. I feel like if he doesn't like it, he can absolutely kick rocks, but that's just me. J.K. Scott still performed in the top, I think, 7 or so of punters in the league. I don't love the idea of having to pay a punter significant money, but I think this is one of those deals where they probably keep him around for another couple of years. He's 30, so punters can practically forever. But I have him on a 2-year, $6 million deal with about 4.5 of that guaranteed. Troy Dye, 2 years, $3 million, 1.5 to 2 of that guaranteed. Taylor Heineke, it's backup quarterback, but still quarterback nonetheless. Starting experience. So 2 years, $5 million, 3 to 3.5 of that guaranteed. Nick Neiman, 2 years, $3.5 million, about 2 guaranteed, and Tony Jefferson rounding it out with a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. So of course it's 1 year, $1.5 million. He gets that full payout.
All right. So what's your total spend in 2025 on the internal guys?
So the internal total comes out to, oh, fantastic. My computer froze. Of course, I'm stuck on my UDFA tab and I can't move it.
All right. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go into mine. I have
go through yours. I'll see it.
Yeah, I have a different list. Well, some are the same, but not all. I was a little stingier with my free agent contracts in terms of who I gave contracts to, but my numbers are a little bit more aggressive, and I'll explain that. So I have the Chargers keeping Tart, Dye, Ford, Molden, and Heineke. That's it. I don't have them keeping Mac. I could see a world where they do it. I wouldn't hate it. I probably wouldn't object too much, but I feel like this is an edge room that needs to be overhauled completely. And I'm just not sure I want to spend what it's going to take to keep him. So again, wouldn't hate it, wouldn't object to it too much, but for this exercise, I did not keep him because I think the Chargers lack a lot of juice on the edge right now. And I think they need to get younger and faster and more explosive there. And I just don't want to dip into that well too much. So that's why I didn't keep Mac. So I started with keeping Puna Ford. I'm sorry, Tyre Tart. Started with Tyre Tart, and I only gave him a 2-year deal. And my reasoning for that is simple. He played well down the stretch. He was a role player. He was disruptive without necessarily being super productive in the stat line. He was good, not great, but he's a guy who I think makes this room better. And I think you don't want to overinvest in him for too long because of some of the issues that he's had in other stops. So for me, I'm re-signing Tart 2 years, $9.5 million. And the way that's going to work out is in year 1, I'm hardly paying him anything. I'm paying him $3 million in year 1. And that is a fully guaranteed $1.5 million base salary and $1.5 million of a prorated signing bonus, $3 million signing bonus. So I signed him for $9.5 million. And let's see here. My numbers are a little bit off, but basically all the value of his contract for the most part is tied up in 2026. Oh, did we lose Craig? There we go.
I'm having no fun with this.
So as I was saying, I re-signed Tart for 2 years, $9.5 million, and most of the value of that contract is tied up in year 2. So I gave the Chargers a parachute, an eject button on that deal to where they can get out of it, basically only paying him $3 million in the first year. So his cap hit next year is $3 million, and I think that's just about right for where he was without over investing and without giving a guy who's been kind of an issue in multiple stops too much security.
Mm-hmm.
Next, I kept Troy Dye. And I looked at this. I went in thinking I was going to let Dye go and keep Neiman. And I looked at snap counts. And what I saw was Dye led the team in special team snaps. And I think he played somewhere like 65% of the defensive snaps down the stretch in the second half of the season. And he was pretty productive against the run. Not great as a pass rusher, not great in coverage, but pretty good against the run, and obviously very productive on special teams. So I looked at him and I looked at Neiman, trying to figure out who I would keep. Dye outsnapped Neiman both on defense and on offense. And I think for that reason, you keep Dye and you let Neiman walk. So for me, it's a 1 year, $5 million contract for Dye, $3 million base salary, $2 million signing bonus. Everything's guaranteed up front. He's here for 1 year as a stopgap, and you try to backfill in free agency and the draft with competition. Pretty easy fix there for me. Then I went on to Puna Ford. Did I lose Craig again?
No, I'm
okay.
here.
Sorry,
it's like I hope not.
I just got your second text message. Sorry, I've got my spreadsheet up. I couldn't see it. So Puna Ford for me, I went a little bit bigger. I went 3 years, $23 million. And I kind of went through some comps for him, and I basically compared him to like an Ashawn Robinson and a couple guys of that similar mold who are not necessarily interior pass rushers, but they're interior disruptors, and they're productive without putting up huge numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Also kind of fell on the same line as a few other defensive tackles who I'm blanking on right now. So for me, 3 years, $23 million for Ford. His cap number in year one is $5 million, and it steps up from there. I guaranteed his signing, his base salary in 2025, and he's got a $6 million signing bonus spread out evenly over 3 years. In year three, there's a $4 million roster bonus. So basically, it's a 2-year deal, and if he plays well, he can earn the third. But he goes from $5 million in year one to $6 million in year two. By year three, you're talking about potentially earning $12 million. So that's what I did with Ford. And then Molden is another guy who I was a little bit more aggressive with. He earned a little bit over $3 million last year. So for me, I don't think he's going to re-sign for $4 million a year. I think he's going to be looking more at the $6 to $8 million a year range. Kind of like what Alohi got last year, but maybe a little bit higher because he was more productive. So for me, I have a 3-year, $26 million contract for Molden, but I structured it in a way that it doesn't hurt that much year one. Year one, he's making $6 million. Year two, he's making 7.5. And then with a $3 million roster bonus in year three, he has the opportunity to make $12.5 million in year three. So first 2 years, pretty easy to swallow. If he's playing well, you keep him at $12 million or you extend him again. If he's not playing well, you cut him and you save yourself $10.5 million and eat $2 million. So that's how I structured that contract. I have Heineke on a 2-year deal worth $18 million. Year one, he is making $6 million. That's $3 million in base salary and $3 million in signing bonus. There's a $1.5 million guaranteed salary. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, sorry. There's $1.5 million in incentives for him. And his base salary in year one is fully guaranteed. Year two, he could earn upwards of $12 million. And of course, you can always cut him if that doesn't work out. So for me, For the internal free agents, I have the Chargers spending $26 million on Tart, Dye, Ford, Molden, and Heineke, and letting pretty much everybody else walk, which takes us to basically $70 million in cap space after dealing with all of the internal free agents, extensions, and restructures and cuts for the Chargers.
Might have frozen up. Did you say what you were going to do with Mac?
I said in the beginning, I'm not re-signing Mac.
Okay.
Wouldn't hate it if they did, but for this exercise, I didn't. So I see somebody here saying 2 years, $8 million for Heineke. No thanks. Or 2 years, $18 million. Keep in mind, the first year is only $6 million, I think. $7.5 million if he earns incentives, which is hard to do if you're not playing. So year one is not very expensive. Year two is just the nature of his contract. The nature of his contract getting more expensive through inflation. He made $14 million over the last 2 years. He's going to be due a little bit of a bump, just the way the salary cap works. But I think it's worth it. You know, if you're talking about averaging $9 million $9 million a year over 2 years for your backup quarterback, and you're comfortable that he can make plays for you if Herbert gets hurt, I think that's worth spending. Teams spend a lot more than that on backup quarterbacks.
Yeah, this is true. I was probably a little bit more heavy-handed. I wish I could see what my total was, but I'm going to have to restart my computer in order to do it because I can't get off of my UDFA tab. My computer's deciding it's going to do its own thing tonight. So as far as the total number of guys that you had on your list, how many guys did you re-sign overall from UDFAs?
How many total?
Yeah.
5.
Okay.
I signed Tart, Ford, Molden, Heineke, and Dye.
Yeah. That rebuilds are going to be something serious.
I'm going to throw this up there. The offense had juice with Dobbins. The offense was frustrating. You make it worse by letting him go. You don't give QB2 $9 million with no RB1. I disagree. You know, they brought Dobbins in on a low rent deal, hoping to turn him into potentially a comp pick. He's a guy who is hurt a lot. He was hurt this year. You don't know that he's going to stay healthy for another year. I wouldn't hate bringing him back, but this is a team that was, if you believe the rumors, and we heard this from Garrett's guy, this is a team that was in on Saquon, and who else were they in on?
Was Henry in the mix there?
I think they were in on Henry too. They were in on 2 or 3 of the top name backs last year. They just didn't have the money to spend on him. So I would not be at all surprised if they spend money on a true number one running back this year. It's not the way I would go, but I could see it because they wanted to do it last year. And if not, I'm still of the opinion that if you continue to build the offensive line, you could put, a mid-level guy back there and he'll still be productive. I don't think you have to bring back Dobbins in order to be successful next year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with it. I just feel like from the standpoint of what Dobbins was and what he offered, and you're thinking about running back by committee, I feel like you can bring him in at a pretty solid number and see if there's a little bit more that he can offer you if you can build the interior of that offensive lineup. Jim Harbaugh has never been shy about the type of running backs that he likes, and I feel like there may be an attachment there to Dobbins. I mean, outside of just from the financial aspects of things, you're looking at a guy who was essentially or should have been named comeback player of the year. I don't even know if they've announced that yet or not certain, but he absolutely should be in the running for it. And he's not going to cost you an arm and a leg to re-sign, I don't think. And there's probably some loyalty there for the Chargers taking a chance on him. So I don't think he's going to haggle a ton when we're talking about re-signing. But no, I can understand them potentially letting him walk. I'd be a little shocked if they do. I feel like they're going to bring him back. It's just personal opinion.
Yeah, I just feel like it's easy in the system to plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily need a top end guy to be productive, as we saw with Dobbins. So it's going to depend on what the market holds for him and what he's expecting in terms of playing time and money. But um, a lot of these guys that they brought in with the intention of having them here for 1 year and then moving on and hopefully getting a comp pick. That's
And
their whole philosophy.
yeah, keeping that in mind, the formula there, we know how big of a deal Ortiz, how big of a deal he makes about comp picks. They're definitely a part of his system, his formulation. So I do see a number of these guys. And I had 11 guys coming back. So I felt like after I did that, it was probably high considering the fact that they're going to want to look at comps for some of them. But yeah, I'm curious to see how the maneuvering goes this offseason when you're talking about a team that we considered in the midst of a functional rebuild, and some of the players that could potentially be let go feel like key cogs that they'd want to keep around at least for another year or two, adjusting to the system, helping to guide whoever they bring in through the draft. So, this team could end up being very, very young in a hurry. And I'm curious to see whether or not that's something or the direction Harbaugh and Ortiz lean in.
So I'm going to respond to something here because I think it's important. Kevin says, I don't know, the league, the NFL, and the 24 season showed that elite backs and solid running back production matters. That is true. But I think if you also look at the big picture, the running backs who had the most success were also running behind dominant offensive lines. I mean, you look at the move that the Eagles made with Saquon, he was basically the final piece.
Mm-hmm.
That offensive line is built out. The tight end room is built out. The quarterback is there. The wide receivers are there. The defense was there. They just needed a bell cow to carry the ball. The Chargers are not in that position. The offensive line is not there. It probably still will not be all the way there at the end of this year, is my guess. The wide receiver room is not there. The tight end room is not there. There are so many other positions they need to fill in that running back should not be the one position, in my opinion, that they go out a ton of money on. Will they do it? They might, because they tried to do it last year and they've got the money to do it. But I just feel like people are missing the big part of the equation with those running backs, which is the offensive lines.
Yeah, absolutely. The Eagles are kind of the gold standard when you're talking about building a team out specifically through the trenches. I mean, they just get it right virtually every year. You're talking about a team that's had a top 3 offensive line for, I don't know, feels like as long as I can remember. And they always seem to find out how to get their hands on the most dominant defensive linemen in the draft virtually every year. It's kind of sickening considering they don't pick very high, but guys just tend to fall in their laps, some because of issues that happen personally. So they just, work out, but out. You can't make me understand how they figured this out year in and year out, even in the secondary. Said that this offseason, you got Quinyon Mitchell and what's his face from Iowa, the cornerback that I really liked. What can I think of his name right now?
What was it? Riley?
Mm-mm.
No, that's not it. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm
that dude.
blanking on his name though.
Yeah, so you're talking about 2 potential first roundish graded corners that they have at their disposal, along with everything
Cooper
else they have
DeJean.
on it.
That's
Dijon,
it.
yeah, DeJean, yeah, that one. So, yep, again, they're the gold standard. Yeah, it's nice to have a top of the league running back, absolutely. And the Giants are idiots for allowing that to happen, but the Eagles had everything else situated first and foremost. So as much as I like the running back position and I believe it's important, you can't get a top of the market running back and stick behind, the Chargers offensive line right now is currently constructed. I mean, it's a nice piece to have, but it won't be nearly as effective as what it could be. And, there's a lot left to do. And if you're looking at this roster, and again, doing this exercise was a reminder of how much they have to replace, which is why I'm leaning a little bit more along the lines of them signing a few more of these guys just because they're going to have to transition. And I just can't see them spending a ton in free agency because I don't think that's how Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz want to build their team. They want to use free agency to supplement. And also don't see them being an extremely young team next year either. So I just view a few more of these guys coming back. But yeah, the points are well taken. We want a great running back. but we want, a dominant trench game also, offensive and defensive line. I'll take that first.
Yeah, build the line and then add the running back. All right. Do we have any questions? Anything anybody else wants to throw out before we go? We got about 5 or 6 minutes here, and then we're going to call it a show. And by the way, you can't overrule me. It's my show.
Cool thing about having a pod, man. You're welcome, but if you don't like it, yeah.
Craig, what was your total cap hit amount for 2025 with the internal?
2025, I'm still frozen up, but I believe it was about 32 because I had Matt coming back.
All right. Do we have any more questions? I have not looked at external free agents, so I can't give you an answer on how much Will Freeze will cost. Because I haven't done that homework yet, so I don't want to give you bad numbers.
Jimmy, what was your internal again? You said
26.
Yeah.
That was just the UDFAs. I think I was at another, call it 3 and change.
Yeah, on the rest
with the rest of the guys.
Yeah, on the UDFAs, I think it came out to around the mid-30s. I wish I could look, but once I reset this computer, I guess maybe I'll be able to. Hopefully my spreadsheet doesn't disappear.
All right. Blazing Bolts wants to know what our thoughts were on the conference championship games. I would say we kind of figured out some things about the Washington Commanders in that NFC championship game. Certainly the offense is probably going to need to progress. And maybe the defense wasn't so good. And that Eagles team is really scary. If they get Saquon going early in a game and in the playoffs, and they can just have Hurts supplement and make a couple throws, they're frightening. And that defense can really get after you.
Yeah, it doesn't get going any earlier than your first carry for 60 and a TD. So, God. But the Commanders, still a very young team. There's a lot of talent there, specifically with Jaden Daniels. And I know that every time I say that, it's got to be weird for you to realize like how great that guy's become. Because I don't think anyone did. But you being a ASU guy, I know that you didn't think the world of him a while back, but it's awesome just to see what he's become in general. But the problem with the Commanders is, again, they're young and they made a bunch of mistakes. You can't lose the turnover battle to that degree against a team that, high powered, that has a great defense and can score literally on a single play. So Commanders have a lot to learn. They'll get better from it. It just wasn't their time, but they made a heck of a run.
Yeah, I mean, going into his senior year at LSU, I really did not think Daniels was very good. He was a guy who had a hard time seeing the field and was always checking the ball down or just tucking and running right away. I was not impressed, but the growth that he showed in his senior year, just as a passer, getting the ball down the field, making the right reads, seeing the field, it was pretty impressive because that was not who he was going when he left ASU to go to LSU. So he deserves a lot of credit for advancing his game. I think the Commanders deserve a lot of credit for putting him in a system that he could flourish in and simplifying things for him. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they step that offense up and evolve it to make it a little bit more complicated, so defenses can't figure them out quite so easily.
And they did a really good job at helping him get the ball out really quickly. You saw a lot of RPO work. I mean, one of the questions that I had about him, I'm not necessarily sure that it's been quelled just this past season. I have to go back and look at a little bit more, watch a few more of the games. His intermediate passing was always something that I questioned. So I'm not sure how much of that happened this year. Like at LSU, it felt like there was just a ton of, check down work, quick screens, slants, getting the ball out to neighbors, and then just chucking it deep because you had two of the best wide receivers in all of college football to go get it. But I did have questions about, his mid game, and I'm not sure how much that's improved in the NFL. Again, I haven't watched him week to week. I just kind of see the highlights of, some of the better throws that he's made, some of the bigger throws. My eldest son is actually a Commanders fan, so I'm sure he could tell me all about it. But yeah, again, really impressed with the year he had. I did not see this coming as year one. I thought he would be an electric player. I just didn't think it would happen so quickly. But again, shout out, kudos to the Commanders coaching staff and development, because they got that kid on the fast track and they've given him what he needed to succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I did not think I'd be saying this after his tenure in Arizona, but the work that Cliff Kingsbury did with Jaden Daniels has him on the fast track to being a head coach again, which is pretty crazy when you think about how bad he was in Arizona.
Well, I don't think Cliff's issue is working with QBs. It's the head coaching thing that's the problem. It feels like can be an offensive coordinator, a QB's coach, like a QB whisperer, but just as a head guy, I don't know if that'll ever be his bag. Just, he'll get another opportunity probably. But with that being said, the work that he does with QBs is pretty much unquestioned. You can't deny that.
This is an interesting question. Thoughts on the Pete Carroll hire? They're pushing the Carroll Harbaugh rivalry. What do you think about that hire? Because I got to be honest, I'm surprised Carroll took that job.
Well, I don't know very many near 80-year-old men that I'll put it this way. Pete Carroll is one of the younger near 80-year-old men you're going to meet. As far as personality goes, he still has all his wits about him and everything. He can still maybe get the job done, but it feels like he wasn't their first option. And then they're kind of fighting for relevance. So you go get a guy, I think he was doing, I don't know if he was consulting with USC or something. I'm not sure what Carroll was doing in the offseason, but he wasn't a hot commodity. It just feels like the Raiders were reaching, and when they couldn't get who they wanted, they just defaulted to Carroll. So I'm actually not shocked. I feel like, when you're a coach and it's in you and there's an opportunity, there are only 32 of these jobs. So when they came knocking, if they're going to give him the opportunity to kind of run it the way that he wants, I'm sure Tom Brady has a little bit to do with this as well. I'm not as surprised that he took the job. I just feel like the whole making this a Harbaugh versus Carroll thing is, like I said before, it's a reach at relevance for the Raiders. And, if they can't win games, then you got to do something to drum up some excitement.
Yeah, it surprised me that he took it. One, because he's almost 80 and he's been out of the game for a while, at least at the NFL level. Two, no quarterback. Three, Mark Davis. And that place is a mess.
Yeah.
And it reads to me like he's babysitting for 3 years. And if he happens to get them into a position where they're remotely successful, they're going to replace him with a younger, hotter head coach. It just seems like a rental. It's just a weird fit for me for a guy who has accomplished so much. And what made him successful in Seattle was the familiarity with the draft classes for the first 3 or 4 years. When he left USC, they don't have that advantage anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like it seems like a waste of time for Carroll. They're not in a position to get a top quarterback unless they're going to trade up for one. I haven't looked at the free agent quarterback class, but I can't imagine there's anything all that exciting.
It ain't pretty, but what I'm thinking is, it's funny to say this, there's an opportunity for Russell Wilson to end up there, and there's familiarity there. So I know that they didn't end on the greatest of terms, but it just kind of makes sense. It works out, and I would not be shocked to end up seeing Russ there. Otherwise, it's like you said, where are they picking in the draft, like 6th or 7th? Could maybe Shedeur Sanders fall to them? Potentially. I'm not certain how that's going to work. We have to watch the draft process and see, how things fare out. But it's not like they have a ton really to offer up as far as maneuverability to move up to get to, I guess, if you wanted one of those guys, maybe 3 or 4. How much are you willing to mortgage? And again, like you mentioned, it's not like they have a ton. So how much time is Pete going to spend trying to build this thing out? Like, how much time does he really have to do it? Not, as far as years left on earth, but how many years are they going to give him to physically do this?
Yeah, I think the other part of it too is the way that they handled firing Pierce and Telesco. They got it right, but they handled it in such a bass-ackward way.
Mm-hmm.
Why would somebody with Carroll's pedigree want to go deal with that? Like, they hung, as much as I hate Antonio Pierce, and I'm glad he got what was coming to him. I feel like they hung him out to dry. Like, they sent him out there in a press conference to say he was staying. They fire him a week later. Telesco says he's staying. They fire him. It's like, I don't know. They got it right, but they went about it the entirely wrong way. So I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
For you.
Yep. All right, everybody. I think that's going to do it. So thanks for joining us tonight. We hope you enjoyed the show. It was a lot of numbers. Hopefully you got something out of it. Chargers, most likely, barring them doing some crazy things that we didn't predict, heading into the off season after handling all their internal business, was somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 million to spend in free agency. And I think they're going to spend a lot of that. So should be a fun and busy off season.
Oh, we got one left from Blazing Bolts. Asking where I think Jimmy Butler is going to get traded to. I don't know, but it needs to happen soon because my Heat are struggling right now, and he is essentially taking all the attention away from what's happening on the court and the young core of guys that are there that are building. Ultimately, he wants to get to Phoenix. Not sure if that happens. That kind of all depends on Bradley Beal and whether or not he'll, let off of that no trade clause. But he kind of holds all the cards. No telling. If I had to guess, it'll either be Phoenix or Golden State.
I'm a Suns fan, and I'm so disgusted with the way they seem to be taking on everybody else's problems.
Yeah.
They've gotten very little out of Durant outside of that first year they went to the championship. They've gotten nothing out of Beal. Now they're trying to talk him into declining his no trade clause, or waiving his no trade clause so that they can go get Butler, who seems like he's a headache. I don't know. Yes. I feel like the Suns need to bag it, start selling off assets, and get younger and pick up some picks. I don't think adding Butler helps at all, but I don't watch a lot of NBA anymore, but I hate them being stuck in the middle and not really doing anything to change things.
Yeah, I just want this Butler soap opera to end. It's tiring.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Hopefully you got something out of it. We will be discussing and announcing the free agency and draft content schedule here pretty soon. So keep an eye out on that. And thank you. We'll see you next time.
Appreciate you guys. Salute.